and tell him, I said, okay, what happened? You signed this confession? Yes, yes. I said, look, I got a great deal for you. He goes, what's that? I said, look, just plead guilty, get an admin SEP, you'll be home in a week, no criminal conviction. Right? And he looks at me. He says, well, I can't do that, sir. I go, what do you mean you can't do that? You made a confession, you did this, you did that. He said, I was just following orders.
This is RVA Trial Lawyers, Virginia's trial lawyer podcast, hosted by Sharif Gray and Niall Abuzaki.
All right, we're back, RVA Trial Lawyers, and today we have Don Marcari joining us. Don Marcari is a personal injury lawyer based out of Virginia Beach with a practice not only in Virginia, but also in North Carolina. And Don, correct me if I'm wrong, but personal injury, workers' compensation, and then quite a large veterans disability practice. Is that right? That's
correct. And then now we're doing probably a significant number of the Camp Lejeune cases.
And what's special about Don, and I mean, every interview I've listened to Don preparing to this, it always comes up, but it was Don's first trial is the trial that the movie A Few Good Men was based on. So forgive me, Don, but I'm going to have questions about A Few Good Men.
It's tough when your first trial becomes a movie. You got nowhere to go after that.
No, it's a dream, right? It's a dream, especially considering it was that movie that in large part did influence my want to go and join the JAG Corps, 11 years ago. But Don, if you wouldn't mind going ahead and introducing yourself to our listeners.
Sure. Thank you for having me. My name is Don Marcari. I've been practicing law for 40 years now. I started off in the JAG Corps as a Navy JAG, then went into a private practice for about 6 years, and probably the last 30 years I've been doing nothing but personal injury work. As you said, we have offices in Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina. I love doing it. I'll be 68. I can't believe it in August. I don't have any plans to slow down because it's a great life.
And why do you love it?
I think it's like I played sports growing up. I think trial work is like playing an athletic game in a suit and tie. I mean, you got to be prepared. You got to be on your game. The stakes are high. You'll never be bored if you're a good trial lawyer.
Absolutely. And it seems like my impression is that as the years go by, like things are changing, right? Jurors are changing. Attention spans are changing. The mediums in which we make our presentations are changing. And so there is no such thing as mastering trial practice.
No, I think I learned something after every trial. I can remember, and even not too long ago, going into the courtroom with an easel and my trial notebooks. And I see some of you young guys over there on the computer and you're typing up stuff. And so the whole, I think jurors nowadays see things on TV, a trial's done in an hour. They want to be entertained. So it's a whole different way, I think, a whole different mindset that the trial lawyers have to understand and appreciate. You can't have a 2-hour direct examination of an expert anymore. The jurors will go to sleep. So I think we have to learn, have to adapt, because you're absolutely right. The whole trial world is changing.
Yes. Now, that said, I do think there is still room for the old school, I'd say blackboard, but no one's going to use a blackboard anymore. But for the whiteboard,
well, I might.
Right? I mean, the chalk and the blackboard, right? Because we go back to school, and a good trial lawyer, in my perspective, is oftentimes someone who is a good teacher, who's able to make it very clear for the jury kind of where things are going to help them reach the right result. So I've got a ton of stuff to ask you about. But what I don't want to forget is learning a little bit more about you. Kind of, where did you grow up? What got you to go to law school and then ultimately into the JAG Corps? And then, of course, I'm going to start asking you about A Few Good Men.
Okay. Well, I was born in New York, but we moved down to North Carolina when I was 8. I went to Appalachian State. I got my undergraduate in political science. I got my master's in public administration. I always thought I wanted to work in the government. And so after I got my master's, I was a city manager for 4 years. But I always, had that desire to go to law school. My grandparents, came from Italy, couldn't speak the language. One of my parents had a high school degree. Education in my family was important. Certainly there was no lawyer, so I really didn't know what a lawyer did because my family never used one. But it always intrigued me. So I was working, had a good job, and would probably have a good career. I wanted to always, because I always respected lawyers, and I always thought they helped people, and that was the way, in my mind, that I could really make a difference. And so my first job offer was with the Attorney General's office in North Carolina, but a buddy of mine wanted to be an Air Force JAG. So I went with them when the JAG recruiters were on campus and ended up talking to a Navy pilot, and he sold me on the benefits of the military. My dad was a Marine, served in World War II. But I respected that. My uncle was a Marine. My brother-in-law was a Marine. So it's just something that intrigued me about the Navy. They said they'd put me in the courtroom right away. And I was actually on the Navy trial team, which we flew all over the world trying cases. We tried cases on aircraft carriers. I remember the first time landing on an aircraft carrier scared the hell out of me. So I had a great career in the Navy.
Can you talk a little bit more about the trial team? Like, what did that look like?
Sure. Well, with the defense counsel in the Navy, probably the same way in the Army, back then there was murders, drugs, rapes, some serious crimes. And we would subpoena a lot of witnesses, as our Navy guys or the defense counsel do. We subpoena witnesses. We asked for delays, continuances, and the commands couldn't get underway because we would subpoena a lot of their crucial personnel. So the Navy decided, we would just fly out to the ships. And so they'd fly a judge out, a prosecutor, a defense counsel. They'd set up a courtroom on the ship, and we would try cases 7 days a week, 10, 11 o'clock at night. Anywhere they needed us, we'd fly out and try the cases. Great experience.
That's awesome. And was that your first job?
That was my first job, yeah.
That's incredible.
I did 2 years as defense counsel, then 2 years as prosecutor.
And then moved on?
And then I got out, yeah. I was thinking about staying in, but back then, I went to the Army schools we were talking about. Army had a great JAG school. But back then with the Navy, it wasn't career enhancing to stay in the courtroom. So that's where I wanted to be. So I ended up getting out. What's
interesting is that only in the last few years has the military actually, I think, started to address that issue. The military, at least in the Army, my experiences, and I think it's for the most part similar among the other branches. The Navy might be a little better at what I'm about to say, but the design is such that the ultimate goal for the career is the equivalent to like what a general counsel would be at a company, right? It's the staff judge advocate,
right? Exactly.
Right. It's the person who can be the commander's right-hand man and say, hey, yep, I know a little bit about kind of everything, and then have a team under him with presumed expertise to be able to kind of handle those things. But it's not great when it comes to keeping people who just have that thing about wanting to be in the courtroom. Right.
And so there was a lot of terminal 04s, they wanted to be a judge and then wanted to stay in the courtroom, and they didn't get advanced. The one thing I will say about the military justice system, and I was speaking with F. Lee Bailey before he passed, he was a Marine Corps JAG. Right. The military system unlike most sailors don't think this, or soldiers, but the military system is so good because it's open discovery. If you need an expert, they pay for it. I did a capital murder case one time where I got an expert in maggots because they found the victim in the dunes down in Florida, and there was a question about how long she'd been dead. So I got an expert in maggots. In the civilian world, you can't. When I first got out, was with my two other partners. We were doing a criminal case, and I said, okay, where are our experts? And my partner looked at me and go, who's going to afford to pay for those experts? So the military system is a good system in a lot of ways.
I agree. I was defense counsel in the Army. And not only are you getting, if you're accused of a crime in the military, not only are you getting free counsel, but even if you choose to hire civilian counsel, you get your free JAG in addition to civilian counsel. And as you said, Don, the experts and all that stuff, and the rules are more or less favorable. There are issues, though. The jury is not a traditional jury. It's typically commanders and sergeant majors who just struggle to relate, or I'd expect would struggle to relate to the 19-year-old junior enlisted who has been told by these same, or not these same, but exactly. by these same type of officers, right, that, hey, don't do anything stupid this weekend, and here they are. But no, I agree. I personally thought that some of the purest practice of law was defending soldiers in the Army, at least in my experience.
Great experience. That's great trial experience.
It really, really is. And I still, to this day, when people ask me, and they say they want to be a trial lawyer, and they ask me, all right, well, what should I do? The JAG Corps is always always a recommendation.
You don't get that experience hardly anywhere else. Yeah.
And I didn't appreciate it at the time, Don, because I went to law school with the mindset of, I want to be a trial lawyer. I've seen all the movies, to include A Few Good Men, and thinking that's just what lawyers do, right? Yeah. And so I'm in law school, and I'm thinking, all right, cool, that's what I'm going to do. I go to the JAG Corps. I tried a ton of cases, and I was very lucky to do so, and also a ton of administrative separation boards, which also, I mean, very much model a regular criminal trial. And when I left, it took me a few years to like really appreciate, like, wow, I've got a lot of trial experience compared to the average.
When you
lawyer.
come out, right, you tried cases that people straight out of law school that go in the civilian world don't get experience for 5 or 10 years like you get in 2 or 3.
Oh, yeah. I mean, for us, I mean, sex assault, rape,
everything,
and I mean, are big issues and have been big issues for years now in the military, and they're a priority. So, I mean, your very first case going into the military is often one of those. And I mean, you
my
look at
first case was attempted murder.
Yeah, which is wild, right? I mean, and also a Hollywood movie, right? So, but it's amazing. I mean, and there's pros and cons, right? I mean, there is criticism, like why are we giving these serious cases to lawyers who have only been in practice for a couple years, right? But then on the flip side, I mean, it's also a great experience for the lawyers. But anyways, no, it's the JAG Corps is great, and it sounds like you got a ton of great experience in the JAG Corps.
Great place to start. Recommend it highly.
Do you ever miss it?
I do. If I think it would have been career enhancing to stay in the courtroom, I might have stayed in. Yeah, because I met some great people. Had great trials. Yeah, I do miss it. Yeah.
It's funny. I felt the same way. Had the Army come to me and said, Sharif, you can stay as a criminal defense lawyer and not have to move your family around every couple of years. Yeah. It would have been a tough decision to leave. Yeah. I mean, because it just felt like such a noble profession, especially doing the defense.
Right. You were serving your country. You were helping out the sailors and soldiers. Right. I mean, it was
money wasn't a concern. Right. Meaning, like, you got paid a fine salary. Yeah. You weren't having to deal with fee agreements with your clients or collect or anything like that. Yeah. So yeah. It's great. And I joke every time I get a haircut, I always get kind of short and I come back to the office. I'm like, yep, I'm going back in.
That's right. But I think I failed my first 9 inspections for my haircut. So,
Yeah. I mean, there's a reason why we get out of the military, right? Yeah. So actually, there isn't just a reason. There are many reasons, but it's the nostalgia is still nice. That's right. Well, can we talk a little bit about A Few Good Men?
Sure. So
how did that come about?
I was stationed at Naval Air Station Oceana. I had not tried a case yet, and my OIC said that there were 10 Marines in the brig in Guantanamo Bay. They were charged with attempted murder. The guy didn't die like in the movie. They had all made confessions. The colonel was getting ready to put on his star, become a general, and they were doing these things called Code Reds, like a blanket party, which they're still doing. And so we were just supposed to go down there and plead them out and get them a good deal. So, I was in Norfolk at the MAC terminal, so the Military Airlift Command. So my OIC says, look, go down and meet with the colonel and think you can get a good deal. I said, okay. So I fly down there and meet with the Jack Nicholson character, who was the most realistic character in the whole movie. He tells me, well, these are the 10 best Marines, but what they did was wrong. But I'll tell you what, instead of a felony conviction, in 20 years in Leavenworth, I'll give them an admin separation. They go home with an OTH, other than discharge. I thought, well, I'm a hero, right? That's great. So I go in the brig. I flew down there in July in my little white uniform, and it's hot as hell in Cuba in July. And so, my client says, sir, Lieutenant Marcari, sir, all the Marines are, pretty, they're pretty tough. And tell him, I said, okay, what happened? You signed his confession? Yes. I said, look, I got a great deal for you. He goes, what's that? I said, look, just plead guilty, get an admin sep, you'll be home in a week, no criminal conviction. Right? And he looks at me. He says, well, I can't do that, sir. I go, what do you mean you can't do that? You made a confession, you did this, you did that. He said, I was just following orders. Like, oh, hell. Which is the defense in the military. Yeah. My lie, Lieutenant Cal used it. The Nuremberg defendant used it. As you know, it's a valid defense. So we end up, 7 of the kids took the OTH, and my client, 2 other ones, end up going to court.
So when you meet your client and he says that, what's going through your head? You've never tried a case.
Never tried a case,
right?
And being young and stupid, I'm thinking, you've made a confession, right? I mean, all the elements are right there. You've agreed to it. The prosecution doesn't have to do much, and now I've got to go prove that this colonel and the whole chain of command gave you an order, which it was an implied order at that. It wasn't even a direct order. But, the first thing I think that was my first big lesson is that sometimes your client, you're the only person your client has, right? Good or bad, and he's counting on you. And so you've got to be ethical, and you've got to tell him the truth and the good and the bad. But at the end of the day, you're all he's got. And so that was the mindset that I learned, 40 years ago that I've tried to keep with me today, no matter who I represent. They're a person, they have a right to have an effective lawyer. And so I can honestly say, I don't think I've ever sold a client short. And I can sleep with myself at night. I can look in the mirror knowing that I've done the best I could.
So what does that conversation look like then? So your client tells you, and I mean, obviously don't need to go into anything that would be considered privileged, but the client says, no, we're doing it. I mean, was there any hesitation on his part, or is it?
No, he's the real hero. Because he believed in the Marine Corps. He believed that he received an order. He believed that's what the chain of command wanted him to do. He believed he was doing his duty. They have a saying, unit, corps, God, country. And he believed in that. And so when we talked through it, I was like, yeah, okay, we can do this.
Now, proving that he acted pursuant to an order, how did you all go about finding that evidence?
Well, what happened was there was a fence line shooting in Cuba, which caused, as you can imagine, an international incident.
Right.
Because we had down in Cuba, we have a base, a 45 square mile base. That was a thorn in Castro's side. And so there's a no man's land. And so we have guard towers. They're about 1,000 yards apart. And one day, one of the kids said, I think I could drop that Cuban guard. And the other Marine said, I don't think you can. And so they fired over the fence line into Cuba. It was a big incident. Their embassy talked to our embassy. Well, the NIS, it's the NCIS now, but the NIS came down and started investigating. And what happened was this kid, Alvarado, I think his name was Santiago in the movie, he writes to his senator, Bill Bradley from New Jersey, and says, if you'll get me off the island, because he hated being there. The Marines down there, it's arduous duty. They're 7 days on the fence line, 7 days off. He said, if you'll get me off the island, I'll tell you about this fence line shooting. So they send the NIS down there. They talk to the captain. And he says, well, who's telling you all this? And he says, this PFC Alvarado. He said, well, Alvarado's a shit Marine. Excuse my language. You can't believe anything he says. So the captain, who was played by Lieutenant Colonel Markinson in the movie, who actually testified for me in the movie, he killed himself. He gets the Rife Security Company Windward Barracks together on a Friday and says, look, we have a disloyal Marine. He broke the chain of command. I'm not going to tell you who it is, but I'm disappointed in you kids. And he leaves. Well, then the first lieutenant, played by Kiefer Sutherland, gets the 4 squad leaders together. And he says, look, you got a disloyal Marine. He broke the chain of command. Now, I don't want you to take him up to the third deck and throw him off and kill him. But if he falls down the steps late at night, oh, well, right? So now the squad leaders tell the rest of the Rife Security Company Windward platoon about this and what the lieutenant says. So the next day, so all the kids are saying, well, we're going to get this kid Alvarado. He's a narc. He's a snitch. So the next day, the captain is going to the compound, and he hears all this. So he goes to the colonel and says, Colonel, look, we got to transfer this kid off the island. I mean, he's going to get his ass killed. So the colonel says, well, if he wants to be a snitch, let him sweat it out over the weekend, and we'll transfer him on Monday. So the kids hear this. So that night, they figure, we got to do something. And Alvarado had long hair for a Marine. And so they went into his barracks room that night with the intention of just shaving his head and embarrass him at formation. But they stuck a gag in his mouth, and the gag went down his throat and cut off his wind supply. And he started spitting up blood. And so they saw that, and they took the gag out, and they transferred him off the island, and he ended up living. So those are the facts that we had to bring in front of the jury, and I had to put the colonel on the stand and the captain to testify to all this.
And how did you end up discovering that story?
Well, just from my client and also talking to the other people in the platoon. I mean, now the colonel was the only one that didn't admit it. He said he never said that. But the captain testified for me. The first lieutenant ended up getting court-martialed. So he didn't testify. He took the fifth. So it was just trying to build that story with the building blocks, with all the kids.
That's why. Did you face, I mean, this is probably a dumb question, but did you face resistance trying to go down that what they probably would have termed a rabbit hole, right?
Yeah, I tried to get the case transferred back to the States, but we tried it down in Gitmo. I tried to get a Navy jury, or a Marine Corps jury, excuse me, but they put a lot of, because I figured they would know about code reds.
Right.
But they gave me all a Navy jury. So I think at every twist and turn, there was a lot of resistance.
Were you by yourself, or did you have Demi Moore on your side?
I wish. In fact, when the movie came out, I went to see it with my client, and I told him halfway through, I said, look, Dave, if it would have been a Demi Moore, I'd have pled you guilty and been in the O Club with her, and you'd be Leavenworth right now. So unfortunately, no Demi Moore.
How long did the trial go?
About a week. Yeah. So I put the Commandant of the Marine Corps on the stand because he came down there and he was talking about code reds. So we were down at promotion sessions, but then we flew for the trial. So it was about a week long.
What's going through my head is now this is just trying to think what it would be like to have a case like that as my first trial ever and to be doing it solo. I mean, that is incredible.
Yeah. I think, sometimes you don't know what you don't know. I'm thinking now if I would have been in longer, would I have had more respect for the colonel, for the process, for the system? I'm kind of glad it was my first case.
I wonder in some sense, like the newness of it, right? Was helpful, right? I mean, newness is probably the wrong word, but the rawness, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Because the jury can look and see and say, wait, this is a young officer who's clearly doing the best that he can for his client, and he's making good points, and we get it, right? I mean, I'm guessing that had something.
Well, I think the good thing about the newness is which I still do today, I think I probably over-prepare because I'm not a good enough lawyer just to go wing it. And so I think you have to have everything, every aspect of that case, even if you don't use it in a trial, I think you have to be prepared to use it, the evidence, and to know that case inside and out. And so, looking back, I think I worked because somebody was facing, 20 years in Leavenworth, but I think I worked my ass off getting ready, and I still try to do that today.
Absolutely. I mean, that's where you win cases, right? It's in the preparation. You can't just show up and wing it.
At least I can. I'm not good enough to do that.
I mean, I don't think anyone. And the lawyers who out there who you keep seeing the big verdicts and all that. I mean, what you're not seeing is all the work, right? You're seeing the tip of the iceberg. You're not seeing
months and months,
right? And the focus group.
And if you're not willing to do that, you shouldn't do trial work,
right? And I wonder to some degree if that's influenced what I've seen is the lessening of trial work. Right. And especially in the civil world. I mean, in the Chesterfield Circuit Court, I believe when they're doing scheduling, I don't know, this was as of a couple of years ago, they're setting 5 civil jury trials for the same day because they know, I don't know, whatever, name your percentage, but 95% of the time, they're all going to resolve.
Yeah. And I think that's hurting our profession because certainly, it's easier to settle a case. Right. I mean, you don't have to put in the weekends, the nights, the stress. So that's why I tell myself and my lawyers, look, don't ever settle a case cheaply. If it needs to go to court, go to court. If it needs to settle, then settle. But don't do it because you want to take the easy way. And I think that's what, like we were talking before, in England, there's a difference between barristers and solicitors. I think barristers can go to court. In this country, your first day out of law school, you can go try a capital murder case, right? You can go sue Ford or whoever you want to sue, And that shouldn't be the way it is. You should have to pass some kind of, in my opinion, qualifications to be a trial lawyer.
You know who also says that exact same thing, which is kind of funny? F. Lee Bailey.
Really?
So, and actually, I've got his book. I'll be happy to send it to you after this. But F. Lee Bailey has a book. I think it's called To Be a Trial Lawyer, or certainly something along those lines.
Right.
But he dedicates a part to that book to say just exactly what you said. Yeah. Anyone can go into a courtroom. There needs to be something.
Yeah, it's really
because there is it's a special skill set, and it takes a ton of work.
And I still, after 40 years, I still learn something after every trial. I mean, there's something I look at and think, could have done that better, shouldn't have done that. Why didn't I do that? I mean, it's a profession that you can never fully master, I don't think.
I agree. and you have to continue to push the envelope. And one thing that I really respect about our practice area is that there are some of these famous trial lawyers who they will try tough cases and they will lose and they'll be open about it.
Well, if you're not losing, you're not trying them, right?
Right.
Because, nobody, I had a case in Reedsville, North Carolina a year or two ago. I was sure, I was going to get a verdict. I was sure. And they came out with a goose egg. I looked, I tried to post-mortem that case to find out, what I do wrong, or because you want to blame yourself, right? You think, okay, I should have done something different. And sometimes that's what I think the most important aspect of a trial now is picking a jury that's going to be receptive to your theme and your message. Not that they're liberal or conservative, but just people that are open, that will listen to the evidence and make a fair decision on that.
I agree completely.
Yeah.
And actually, one of the recurring themes on this podcast, I've lost count now, and I'm not good at counting, but I think we're at episode 13 or 14. We've interviewed a lot of really seasoned and experienced trial lawyers, and the consistent theme is, it's voir dire. It's jury selection.
No question.
And in many respects, the case is won or lost in jury selection. And it makes sense, because who's filling out that worksheet at the end of the case? It isn't us. It isn't the defense. It isn't the judge. It's the jury.
Well, when I was a young lawyer, I thought, my closed argument, I'm going to wow on my closed argument. Then it was like, my opening statement. And then it was, I'm going to have a great direct. But it's voir dire where it all starts. You've got to find just fair people, that nice people that, that just will listen and don't have, everybody's got preconceived notions.
Right.
I'm not going to change somebody's mind about the McDonald's coffee case, in 5 minutes. They have their notions, and if they know the facts, they'll realize it's not as egregious as some people say. But I always tell people I'm not smart enough or good enough to change a person's mind doesn't want to be changed.
Yeah, they're just not a good fit for this case.
They're just not a good fit, right?
Yeah, they're just not a good fit. And jury selection is just such an important part of the trial. And one of the concerns I have about Virginia, and it's kind of my mini crusade to change, is our code section on voir dire is wildly open, right? To the point where there's even language in there that says counsel has a right to ask certain questions relevant to, I believe there's 3 or 4 different factors. Yet Virginia has historically been very tight on voir dire. And frankly, despite the case law, I've seen it a number of times where judges will rehabilitate. They'll say, well, you can still be fair and impartial, right? There's case law that says you can't do that. And for obvious reasons, right? Because who's going to say no unless somebody's trying to get off the jury? But one thing that I've kind of come to accept and actually really push is that jury selection is less about deselection and more about kind of inclusion, right? Because most people nobody wakes up one day and says, broken arm worth $37,000, right? It just doesn't happen, right?
I think there was a book that would tell us what that's worth.
Yeah, exactly. And I get that question of voir dire from jurors all the time. And actually, funny enough, it was a trial in Richmond. I did get that question from a juror, and the judge interrupted and was like, "This is why I hate open-ended voir dire." And then I was like, "Judge, don't worry. I only got 3 more days of this." The jury laughed. The judge did not. But it was eye-opening. What I try to do is I don't look at anyone as a bad juror. And I think none of the stuff that I'm coming up with is stuff that it's all the stuff that I'm copying, that I've learned. And I've been very grateful to have a lot of opportunities to learn some really exceptional trial lawyers. But it's not, you're a bad juror, right? It's not, at least the approach that I take now is not one of interrogation. It's not, have you been in a car wreck before? All right, well, who did you vote? Stuff like that, right? It's let's talk about this issue. How do you feel about the idea of coming up with a dollar amount for something as important, but also as difficult as something like pain and suffering?
That's the big thing, pain and suffering. You can, as you know, we can talk about lost wages and the medical bills, but when you get to physical pain, emotional suffering, how do you, because a lot of people go, well, you can't, is it worth $1 a day or $100 a day?
Well, Virginia even says you can't even do that, right? Can you in North Carolina?
In North Carolina, you can.
You can?
Right. So you have much more open voir dire in North Carolina, which I like. As you know, in Virginia, some judges go, okay, well, I'm going to ask the questions or give you 2 or 3. So you're exactly right. You just want to find out how that person feels, because everybody feels differently about, no matter whether Republican, Democrat, black, white, however. But there's certain issues in a trial that are important, that are crucial, that will make the difference. And
Absolutely.
you've got to find out how that juror feels about that.
Absolutely. And you got to listen to them.
Right. And watch their body language, listen to their words, and all.
Yeah. And really listen.
Right.
And we had a trial a few years ago, and I tell this story often. So if our listeners have already heard it, feel free to tune me out. But it was, I believe it was in Chesterfield, and it was a car wreck case. And during jury selection, there was a juror who had owned and or worked as like an insurance adjuster / insurance agency. And I remember at one point during that jury selection, and I was still kind of getting new to this methodology, I remember kind of taking a step back and saying, ma'am, and I forgot what her name was, but I'm sure I used her name because I think that's important. And I remember saying, ma'am, like, I'll be honest with you, I'm kind of concerned with you being on this jury. I mean, you literally deal with people like me and my colleague every day. Like, how do you feel about being on this jury? And it was a little bit longer of an exchange than that. But ultimately, she came back and said, I will call it fair.
Right.
And I said, well, I appreciate that, and I trust you, and I have no reason to doubt what you're telling me, right? And we kept her. And the case, for other reasons, probably my fault, but ended in mistrial on our last witness. But of all the people that we sent feedback letters to asking for feedback, the one person who responded was that lady.
Right.
And it was very clear from our conversation with her that she had become kind of the unofficial spokesperson or a person for the jury. And then when I asked her what her number was, now keep in mind the evidence hadn't closed at this point. We're on the last witness of the trial. And she said, well, you said not to exceed $750,000. And I thought that was fair. And this is a person, right? Who, like, textbook answer is you get rid of that person.
If you just see that a questionnaire, what she did, she's gone.
She's gone.
Yeah.
But I mean, I tell people all the time, like, if you look at my resume and look at like my background, you see VMI, military, former prosecutor, you're probably like, man, I want that guy as a jury if I'm a prosecutor in a criminal case. I'm the first one to acquit if you don't meet your burden, So the stereotypes don't work. They don't work. And I think it's a fool's errand to rely on stereotypes. And secondly, to your point, I think it's really a fool's errand to think that you're going to change someone's mind. I mean, somebody who's 45 years old who comes into for jury duty, it's arrogant to think that us as lawyers are going to be able to change someone's core belief, right? If someone comes in and says, I can pay someone for their medical bills, but just you're never going to get me to pay for or to provide money for things like pain and suffering, to think that we're going to change their mind. I mean,
that's the best lesson that you give to a new lawyer is try your cases. You're not going to do it, right? You're not going to do it.
You're just not. Yeah. So, which again comes back to why jury selection is so important. Now, the one thing that I've learned and I am really trying to practice on is genuinely finding ways to connect with the jury in a way that at least they know that I'm going to call it like it is. And because I believe, and again, I'm saying I believe it's based on experience and from what I've learned is that at the end of the day, the jury, they rightfully presume that the lawyers and the judges know more about the case, and that's a fact. We do, right? And so at the end of the day, they're looking for a guide. Who can they trust? Right. And if you're able to stand up there and credibly say, "Here are the problems with this case," like, I recognize there's this gap in treatment. I recognize such and such, right? And now you can reframe things and all that. But if you're able to at least be honest with them, and chances are when there is that close call, maybe they'll go your way.
Well, I think, too, one thing that I've learned, and maybe this is not a good comment on our system, but jurors, they make their decisions. I mean, as soon as you enter that courtroom, they're looking at the lawyers, right? They're thinking about, okay, who is credible, like to your point, to them? Who's going to be honest to them? And it's amazing. I just you learn these things for every trial. And I was down in the Outer Banks when I was a young lawyer, and I was wearing cufflinks. And afterwards, one of the jurors came in and said, well, you look like one of them lawyers from the mafia. I've never worn cufflinks since then.
That's
I never
funny.
wear, a Rolex. I never did. I dressed in a certain way I interact with the defense counsel, who may be a buddy of mine, in a different way. I'm respectful, but I'm not yucking it up with them during the recesses. I tell my clients, look, the jury is going to be watching everything you do. And so when I go into a courtroom, I want to be the truth sayer, right? I want them to, and I'll introduce, if the judge may have done it, I introduce myself, the defense counsel, the judge, and I tell them, look, this is the part of the trial, because they've never been there before, more than likely, right? And so they don't know what the expectations are. They don't know what's going to happen. They really don't want to be there, right? And so I think you've got to get them on your side as soon as you can.
Absolutely.
Right? In whatever way that is, and just be yourself. I mean, if you make a mistake, laugh at yourself, and say, because I think the human element, because we don't have the best reputation in the world. I mean,
right.
Lawyers are at the bottom probably.
Well, then add PI to it.
That's right. And we probably deserve that reputation somewhat. So you got to get them to like you, to believe in you. If they believe in you, they'll believe in your client and their evidence. I think that's the human element of a trial, and that connection with the jurors are crucial.
Yeah, and your willingness to be kind of vulnerable and authentic.
Right.
I mean, I did the Jerry Spence 3-week program, which we spoke about before we went on the air, and one of the exercises that they make you do is the classes for the most part are in this big barn, and there's a picnic table kind of in the front of the classroom, and class, I don't know, 40 people or so. That's the group. And over the course of the 3 weeks, you are required to stand on that picnic table, sing a song one time, stand on the picnic table, recite a poem, and then stand on the picnic table and tell a story to the class, right? So, and talk about being out of your comfort zone, right?
Oh my God, I can't imagine.
But the lesson that I learned by the end of it was that we're drawn to the people who are willing to put themselves out there. We're drawn to it was so much more powerful and beautiful. It's corny of a word, but true, beautiful to see someone scared get on that picnic table and sing a song versus hearing like a professional get there, right?
Well, I get young lawyer people tell me, well, if I want to be a lawyer, what should I major in undergraduate school? And that, as you know, you can major in whatever you want. But I tell them, look, major in psychology. I mean, don't worry about anything else. If you really want to be a lawyer, take a psychology class. Because that's what you're dealing with is people.
It really is.
Every day.
What's interesting is just law school doesn't even touch that.
Nothing like that. There's so many things,
We're talking a lot about voir dire and kind of getting ahead at the beginning of the case. And so why is that, right? There's a really famous, actually, are you familiar with a guy named Herbert Stern? He's okay. Yeah. So Herbert Stern, he's written, I think, the classic book along with a professor at GW named Stephen Salzberg called Trying Cases to Win. I think it's like a 5-volume set. Anyways, I can't read that many pages, but I have read his condensed version. Right. It's called Trying Cases to Win in 1 volume. It's freaking excellent. But anyways, one of the lessons is we want to get ahead. This idea in voir dire and opening is because this idea of waiting till closing is just too late.
Right.
It's just too late. It's the people make up their minds, as you mentioned, Don, when they're walking into the courtroom and they see the practitioners. I mean, they're making up their minds instantly.
Right.
So if you're able to get them on your side, build some credibility, frame some issues in voir dire, and then present your case in a compelling way and opening, especially as a plaintiff's attorney or a prosecutor who has that amazing advantage of getting to go first, and now people are already leaning your way, well, it's a hell of an effort to try and get those same people to switch sides, because not only do you have to convince them that the other side was wrong, you now have to convince that person that their ego that they were wrong, right? And so, it's the idea that psychology is not a big part of law school is absolutely absurd, right?
Exactly.
Because that's it.
Yeah, that's all it is.
That's all it is. But it has to be done in a way that isn't manipulative either. That's genuine.
Yeah, because people can pick that up. I mean, I think people inherently have a sixth sense when somebody's not being honest with them.
Yeah, we can tell.
Yeah.
We can tell. Well, so Don, are you still taking cases to trial now?
I still do, yeah. Not as much as I used to, because quite frankly, my energy level at 67, 68 is not what it was when I was 40, right? And to be a successful trial lawyer, I still do a lot of mediations, a lot of depositions, But to, get ready for trial, I mean, it's nights, it's weekends. It takes a lot of time and effort. And if you're not, like I said before, if you're not willing to do that, you shouldn't do it. So I think, by preparing the case and working it up, now let's see, we have in North Carolina, it's court-ordered mediation. Virginia, we don't have it. But if I can get to
some
mediation,
courts do, but
some courts, and a lot of defense counsel will now agree to do that. If I can get to mediation, I think then I have a pretty good chance. I'm always honest with the other side. I acknowledge my weaknesses. There's no perfect case, right? And if it's going to trial, there's probably some warts that are there anyway. But I will still do the trucking cases, the bigger cases, but not as much as I used to, just because I don't feel, like I said, if I'm not willing to do that and go that extra mile, then I think you have to be honest with yourself about that.
And you're wearing a number of hats too, right?
Yeah, I'm the managing partner. So I've got, 110 people, 3 big offices, a couple small offices. We're a profession, but we're also a business. I have a CFO, a marketing director, an IT director. So I've got to keep that business aspect still going. And it's, it's expensive to run a practice, as you know, especially with the, with 100-something people. And then you got to train them. I want all my people to be the paralegals to be trained, the lawyers to be trained. I demand excellence, and I'm finding wearing 2 different hats, and that's a big internal discussion I'm having with myself. Do I go back and do all trial work, or do I go back and just focus on the management?
Do you have one that you prefer?
I like the trial work better. Yeah. But I need somebody. I realize I need somebody to manage, but I'd much rather somebody else do that and just do the trial work. I would be perfectly happy just going back to that realm because it's exciting. You really get to help people. You have heartbreaks. You put your soul into a case for months and it doesn't turn out like you thought it would be. I mean, that's discouraging, especially if you believe it's really right. But the trial work is still where my heart is.
And it's not as common nowadays too, so it's important to keep pushing it. And I imagine if I'm a young lawyer at your firm and seeing the managing partner still taking cases to trial, that's huge.
Yeah,
right.
Helps.
That's huge.
Right. I believe, as you know, with the military, you lead from the front. And so if I'm not willing to do something, then I can't expect the rest of my team to do it. So,
how have you found an effective way to encourage your lawyers under you to push cases to trial?
I think we try to have a monthly meeting at least, if not more. And my door is always open. But I just look at it, and I've been doing it 40 years, so I can tell the strengths and weaknesses of a case fairly easy. If you'll give me the file, now a lot of the guys run a computer, but if you give me the file, I can talk to you about, hey, why are you doing this? What's the offer? What's the strengths? What's the weakness? And we have a mission statement that I wrote 25 years ago that I still believe in. We haven't changed it in 25 years. One of the maxims is to treat every case as if it was your mother's. And that's what I tell them. If this was your mother's case, would you handle it this way? And I think if everybody's honest with themselves, then they can say, no, maybe I should do something more. Yeah, maybe I'm doing my best.
I love that because, it really makes you.
And I have that mission statement posted in every break room, in every onboarding package. It's there. And like I said, it hadn't changed in 25 years.
Something that I've noticed is that just the willingness to move the ball forward when it comes to putting a case in litigation and getting ready for trial, I have seen just in and of itself increases the value.
Oh, no question. You can, yes. And I tell the lawyers, look, file suit, take a deposition. Let's see what happens. Because, a lot of times you're dealing with these frontline adjusters, and sad to say, a lot of these insurance companies they're hiring, they've got people that aren't very qualified or experienced. I remember when I first started doing this, the adjusters would come out to my office, and we would sit down. I would know their kids. They would know my kids. We'd get to know each other, and we'd settle cases that way. Nowadays, you never get to meet somebody on the other side.
And I think they have limited their authorities. It's almost set up like how you're buying a car, right? Like it's like I don't have authority for that, but I might be able to go to my supervisor and to see if I can. So in some sense, there's the built-in bureaucracy, I believe, has made it harder to get decent resolutions.
Right. Well, they got all these computer software programs. They plug in all the stuff and they come out with some fictitious number.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, where do you get that? How do you want me to settle the case for that? I mean, you tell me how I tell my client to accept X for something that should be Y. That's the only authority I have. I said, well, I'm going to file suit.
And the number typically always goes up when you file suit. And when it comes to training your lawyers, is there anything in particular that you push them towards?
As far as, I want them to know the biggest thing, know the facts of the case, and to talk to the client to find out how this accident's affected them, right? Talk to their spouse, talk to their cousins, their best friends. I try to tell my lawyers this accident, no matter how big or small, has affected that person in some way. Maybe they had a good car that was paid for. Now they got a car payment. Maybe they had to miss work. Most people live in month to month, paycheck to paycheck. They couldn't pay their bills. They had to go to the doctor and wait for 2 or 3 hours. They missed their kid's graduation or something. There's always something about a case that if you delve into it, you'll find some nugget that you can use with the adjuster.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of coming full circle. It's like you're finding the human story behind the case.
Exactly.
Right?
And everybody's got that story.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not about the broken foot, right?
Right.
It's about...
I couldn't play soccer. I couldn't walk up the steps,
Yeah. Couldn't play with my kid, right?
Right.
That, in many respects, is why this is such, I think, a meaningful profession. Because, I stole this line from Keith Mitnick, who we were talking about earlier, but the job isn't to award money. This is not an award. No, this is not.
Exactly.
The job isn't to give, the jury's job isn't to give someone. The jury's job is to recognize the full and fair value of what was taken from someone's health and quality of life.
And that's
they're appraisers.
Yeah,
right?
the sad part about what we do is it's about the only thing that law can do is give the person money, and that kind of cheapens what they've been through. But that's the only remedy in a civil case is a monetary award. So you have to talk about money. And I wish there was a book up to go by to tell us what a case is worth. But you're right, it's not an award. It's just some acknowledgement of what the person has went through.
Yeah, it's some attempt to try and make them whole. And you never can, right?
Right, you can't replace.
I don't think I've ever had a client who has said, man, I'm so glad I got this settlement or a verdict, right? And I would get this injury again tomorrow, right? I've never seen that.
I had a big case against one of the big box stores. And my client was truly hurt. He was a fisherman down in Wanchese. And we got 7 figures, but he told me, he said, look, tell them that they can keep their money. Just give me back my health. They can't. No matter how big that award, it was more money than he'd ever saw in his life, but he'd rather have his health back. And I think most people who have been seriously injured feel that way.
No, I agree. Again, I haven't had a client who's ever said anything.
But I got this accident, yeah.
Yeah. Now, there are those cases, right? But oftentimes they're not getting nearly as far as.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But it is amazing. I don't think I really ever appreciated up until recently just how many personal injury cases there are. It's amazing to me how many people get hurt at no fault of their own. And it's also amazing just how many people really need our help. And it's not easy to find a good lawyer. It's just not.
It isn't. And you think, there's so much out there in the internet, TV, whatever. I started out, we had a big, you couldn't even advertise in the yellow pages. You couldn't be on TV until, after I started my career. But you're right. You've got to find, because it's, everybody thinks being a personal injury lawyer is easy, and it's not easy if you do it good. If you're going to be good at it and spend the time and effort, it's not easy. People say, I can make a phone call and get a big fee. Well, that's not what it's about.
And it's not realistic.
And it's not. And you got to find somebody qualified. That's why I think if you're looking for a lawyer, just interview them. Just call them and find out. Say, hey, how many cases like this do you handle? What do you believe in this? I don't see anything wrong in that.
Yeah. No, I don't either. I've got a few kind of random questions, and I do want to come back to a few good men before we wrap this thing up. But when you guys are talking about the value of a case, what are you looking at? Like what goes into that analysis?
Right. And that's the hardest thing when I teach the young lawyers. Okay. I say, look, here's what I want you to look at. Okay. First of all, and these are just not in any order of importance, but look at the venue. What type of venue are we in? How bad was the property damage? Now, we all know that you could be injured with not much property damage, but a jury, if they had cases where defense counsel just held up a picture of the car and said, look, the car's not hurt, the person can't be hurt. Well, we know that's not true, but it's an aspect that you need to look into. What about your client? Who is your client? What do they do? When did they go to care? What did that first medical record say? What were they complaining about? How long did they go to treatment? Who did they go? Did they go to a PT, a chiropractor? Did they get an MRI? What do they do for work? Did they lose wages? What hobbies can't they do anymore? There's so many factors, I think, to go into value a case besides just the medical bills. A lot of these judges go, well, you only had 3,000 medical bills. They want to give you a factor. Oh, we'll give you 2 times medical bills, 3 times the medical bills. I mean, when I first started practicing, it was 5 times the medical bills. But you can't base it on that. Once I hear, especially in North Carolina, we have bill versus paid, which means you can only put into evidence what it actually takes to satisfy the bill. So you could have a $10,000 medical bill. If Medicare only paid $2,000, you can only put $2,000 in evidence. In Virginia, you can put the whole $10,000. And a lot of times, we talk to the jury and we put up a chart and we use the medical bills as like a ceiling or a floor. But I think the case, I try to tell my lawyers, look, you've got to look at, 10 or 12, whatever, different aspects of the case before you come up with a value.
Absolutely. I tend to think the medical bills, well, when it's helpful to us, we're going to use them, right? But when it's not helpful to us, then we're not going to. Actually, we've got a pending case right now, which we just filed a motion to preclude the defense from raising the medical bills because it's a TBI case. So, and I don't know. I honestly, and I hope defense counsel is listening to this, I have no clue what the bills are because I never asked for them. But I think I saw at one point it was like 10 grand or 15. This was a year ago. And I was like, this is never going to be high enough to be worthy of pursuing. And the case isn't about bills because I like to think, why in the world does and it's not a doctor, but a medical professional, someone in admin who sets the rate of what they charge a patient. Right. How does that have any relation to the full and fair value of a personal injury case?
And you'll find that what they charge can be different based upon private health insurance, self-pay, Medicare, Blue Cross.
Hospital.
There's so many different ways.
Yeah, if you're in Richmond and you get hurt, go to Henrico Doctors Hospital. Right, exactly. The bills are going to be through the roof, right?
Well, good luck. The TBI cases are the most challenging cases, but probably the most rewarding cases you can do because, you can see a fracture, right? You can't, I don't know why, you've seen the inside of a skull. I don't know why God made us this way, but, our brain sits inside a skull and there's so many sharp ridges in there. You don't have to have a big impact for your brain to hit inside of your skull, and you have some serious issues, executive functioning, everything else. So the TBI cases, I particularly like handling those because, I talked, as you're doing, talk to people. You'll find that they have short-term memory loss. They get angry easy. There's so many aspects to it. And the person walks into the courtroom looking normal. Right. And that's the difficult thing about a TBI case.
It's the invisible injury.
Right.
Yeah. Yep. I wonder if in 5 to 10 years, they're going to be taken a little bit more seriously. Not that they aren't, but every TBI case that I've been a part of is a massive fight.
Oh, yeah.
It's a massive fight.
Yeah.
It's much easier to say someone broke their leg and had surgery and all that.
You got an X-ray there, an MRI, and a disc, but
then talk about value. Or value/impact. When you take part of someone's brain, right?
Their personality, who they actually were or are, but it changes. Yeah. They're policy limit cases, if not and more. It's just they're challenging, but they're rewarding.
It's almost like a wrongful death case, right? It's like
it is
depending on the severity. Depending on the severity of the TBI, you've taken a part of that person, right? That person, the person prior to this crash, prior to this incident, is not this person. So, I do still want to come back to Few Good Men. Is that okay?
That's fine.
How did it become a movie?
interesting. So there was 10 accused in the brig. There was only one Navy defense counsel down in Gitmo, so they flew 9 of us in from all over the country. None of us had ever tried a case. And one of the other lawyers was Debbie Sorkin, who was stationed in Florida, and her brother was Aaron Sorkin. And Aaron Sorkin at that time was a 28-year-old unknown playwright. And she was one of the lawyers that pled her client out. I guess she must have got the record of trial and then gave it to Aaron, and he wrote a play that ran on Broadway for 2 years. And then Rob Reiner from Castle Rock bought the playwrights and made a movie out of it. So he did a great job. I mean, great movie. One of the best movies of all time. Yeah. It's probably 50% true.
You can't handle the truth line.
Best line I never said.
They never said?
So right. I had the colonel on the stand and we got into it. I said he was the most realistic character, but I wish I would have said that. But
how about and I recognize, we talked about this earlier, but Demi Moore did not make an appearance, right?
No,
so no strenuous objection?
No strenuous objections. Okay. I did play a lot of softball.
So that is, I mean, that taking a step back, thinking it is wildly similar to the real thing, right?
Oh, there's no question. Right out of the trial.
That's awesome. Well, that's I mean, you have a copy of the movie, obviously, right?
Oh, yeah. Every time I have my birthday present, I get a copy of the movie, so I got plenty of them, I mean, and they still play it. I mean, it's amazing.
It's a great movie.
It's fantastic.
It's a really, they're, legal movies are, I'm biased, right, and my wife would tell you I'm annoying, but I love legal movies, but that one is certainly towards the top.
I still watch it, yeah.
There's another one called Rules of Engagement. I think Samuel Jackson and Tommy Lee Jones is in it. Right. It's about Marines, and it's a good one. But it's surprising. There's actually a decent amount of good military legal movies.
Yeah. Well, I've written it. It's funny you said I don't want to.
Oh, Conduct Unbecoming?
Yeah.
I have that book. Oh my gosh, I forgot. Okay. Well, I'll tell our listeners, I took Dawn on a little trip in this cold outside because our studio, the elevator stopped working. And so anyway, so I was in a embarrassing scramble to get things together today for our podcast episode. But one of the things I had hoped to bring was your book, because it's on my desk.
Well, it's about another trial I had in the Navy. Well, I was actually a civilian, because I still do. I haven't done it in a while, but I still would do court martials. And this was a capital murder case that I did and wrote a book about it. It's on Amazon. In fact, I'm writing a screenplay right now. We'll see, because there's not a lot more. This is the screenplay. It would be a perfect follow-on to A Few Good Men. So we'll see where it goes.
And then we'll get we'll have a second version of a You Can't Handle the Truth, right? That's right. And another, I don't know if Demi Moore would still jump in, but that's awesome.
I could ask.
That's awesome. Well, yeah, that'd be great.
There you go.
Well, before we wrap up, we have a lot of young listeners, law students, young lawyers who listen to this podcast who are genuinely interested in becoming trial lawyers. What do you tell them if this is the path that they want to go nowadays?
Well, I would tell them that they truly have to decide if this is what they want to do, okay? Because it's not an easy path. There may be, as a lawyer, you can do divorce, real estate, criminal. I mean, so many areas you can go into. But if you want to be a trial, you've got to be committed to it. You've got to be willing to put in the hours, and you got to do it, okay? Because the only way to get good at it is to do it, unfortunately. And you will lose cases. You can't get discouraged. But I think the biggest thing is to remember is that you have somebody that's counting on you. So don't take shortcuts, right? Because you can't. There may be a movie you want to go see, or you want to go on vacation, but if you're good at trial work, that trial stays with you. I mean, I can remember, probably like you, at nights, you think about it. When I used to jog, when I could jog, I might be thinking about closing arguments in my head, so it never leaves you. But it's rewarding as hell. And unless I'm 67, and I've never been bored. I don't know how long I'll keep doing it, but it's a great profession. You got to keep learning, and by listening to podcasts like this, sitting in a courtroom, watching other lawyers, reading books, because it's a skill, as I said, that you can be good at it. You won't ever master it, but it's a great career.
Don, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks.
This has been awesome.
Thanks for having me.
You've got an awesome career, and I look forward to staying in touch with you.
I hope you do. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of RVA Trial Lawyers, Virginia's trial lawyer podcast. For more episodes, check out rvatriallawyers.com.